back, everybody, to the Classic Rock Podcast. And on this edition, I'm joined by the former Megadeth duo, the Grammy Award winner, Dave Ellefson and Jeff Young. They are currently together with the Kings of Thrash. They've been touring around North America before they head off to Australia in the summer, and they will be landing in the UK in October of this year. We're going to be looking at the Kings of Thrash project and also back to when they first got together, which was in 1987 with Megadeth, when Jeff came in and took over to record the album that became So Far, So Good, So What. Just a reminder, coming up, we got a new show with a couple of drumming legends. Some real royalty here. Carmine, a piece of Cactus, currently riding high, number 3 in the Billboard Blues charts after the release of Temple of Blues, which is this mammoth collaboration with some incredible names on there, way too many to list. Pat Travers, Doug Aldridge, Ted Nugent is on there, Doug Pennick is on there, and Joe Bonamassa is on the opening track of that album, which is an absolutely rip-roaring version of Parchment Farm, which of course was the opening track of the debut Cactus album. And also on this show, we're going to be talking to Chris Slade as well, who began his career even before Carmine, when he was working with Tom Jones in the 60s, likes of Manfred Mann and Uriah Heep in the 70s and the 80s, before landing the gig with AC/DC to record The Razor's Edge. And of course, he toured with them as well on the Rock or Bust tour a few years ago. He's got a brand new album out. We'll be talking about that and his incredible career as well. And just a reminder, if you've missed any of the recent shows, you can catch up with everything on the website, out on Facebook, and on the YouTube channel. www.theclassicrockpodcast.com is the website. That's where you'll find most of the exclusive video content. Some great interviews, including, if you missed it, Lips of Anvil was on the last show. Great interview, amazing stories from a guy that just doesn't know the word give up, does he? They've just released the 20th studio album. It's called The One and Only, and it's the best thing they've done for over a couple of decades for sure. So listen to that on any of the channels. Now, though, it is on to the main event of this program. Last week, I caught up with the former Megadeth duo of Grammy Award winner Dave Ellefson and Jeff Young.
So look, I want to start with your working relationship together began back in 87 in those sessions for what would become So Far, So Good, So What. Dave, you've been in Megadeth at the beginning, so you were an accomplished musician. Jeff, your story is like a boy's own fantasy. To get in there, you arrive as the teacher. 2 days later, you're in the band. Well, it's a great tale. It's a movie.
2 days. It was they were on a fast track because they had just 2 weeks to finish the record when they contacted me, because they had a gig in the UK. Correct me if I'm wrong, David. Christmas on Earth.
Yep.
Overkill, Cro-Mags. Was Testament on that?
Maybe, yeah. It was up in Leeds, in December.
So we had 2 weeks, so there was no rehearsals. There was none of that. I was given, the first thing they gave me was a cassette of maybe 30 seconds roll up to the solo in Darkest Hour. Start here. Stop there. See you tomorrow. So that's how it started. And I remember the very first night when I came in, Paul Lanny was there, David was there, Gadget, Matt Freeman. And that was about it, that first evening. And I remember I was just being around a bunch of strangers. I wanted to kind of go into my own zone. So I went to the very back wall of the room with the mixing board behind me. Like there was some effects racks. My nose was almost kissing the back wall, and I said, okay, go. And the thing with that album is most of the solos were all improvised, I had one night in that case to sketch something out and come back the next night. Other solos that were shorter, like 502 and Liar, I would literally, like, if I would finish, say, Liar, they'd give me another tape and I'd go in the next room for a half hour and just sketch something out and then go in and cut it.
Your image, I have to mention this, your image at the time wasn't quite on a par with the rest of the band. I like the story of you rocking up, going into the room with Dave in a pair of Dockers and surf shorts. So it was a completely different image.
That story's been greatly exaggerated.
What's the truth?
As most things that come out of his mouth. But actually, I wore at the time those exact same pants that Anthrax wore. Remember, they like down to the knees.
Yeah.
And because we're in California, and I think I was wearing Birkenstocks, to be honest, like kind of Birkenstocks, but
So how did your relationship?
Put on Converse and tight pants.
How did your relationship develop, Dave? Because I know that you said that, he came in and saved the day. He had 4 solos to get in, learn, play, and he literally saved the day. So did you two hit it off straight away?
It was more than 4, but go ahead.
Well, it's funny. I always thought it was 4 solos, and it was, because those were really kind of the main things that we needed. And then I think, and look, I even learned this after working with Jeff these last 2 years, is that he contributed to every song on the record. I did not know that until we got into it, because all the acoustic guitar work was Jeff. And it was such a run and gun mission. And I want to say this: when we were recording the rhythm, the basic tracks, the bass and drums, we had a massive, like 7.4 earthquake in Whittier. It was the Whittier earthquake, as we now know it, and that is a freaking huge earthquake. And I remember we lived over in Silver Lake, so the Music Grinders on Melrose, just north of that is Santa Monica. The next street up is Sunset. So Sunset to the east of Hollywood, just outside of Hollywood, is Silver Lake, which is now like a real hipster kind of place. But that's where the band apartment was, where me and Dave lived. Chuck would come in and out of there a lot. And man, that earthquake I'd never been in an earthquake before. I'd been in California, I guess, 5 years or something, 4 or 5 years, and I'd never been in one. And it scared the living daylights out of me. And as we went to the studio to try to cut some more bass. And man, we'd get these massive aftershocks, and it freaked me out. I mean, I was just completely freaked out, and I think electricity would go on and off, which made it hard to record. So it was an interesting session, the whole record, because we literally came off the Peace Sells tour, and Chris was kind of just naturally gravitated out of the band. I remember Dave and I had to go up and actually face-to-face talk to Gar and let him know he was out of the group, and Chuck was the drum tech, so he was in. So it was just, everything about this record was this just interesting transitional thing, bringing Chuck in, and then, going in and out of nowhere, Jeff lands in the session. And, look, I think from the image point of view, look, every time you come into any group, it's sort of like, hey, what's the dress code? We were in black, we were in blue, we were in shorts, we were in bullet belts. What are we doing? So, and it's funny, as Jeff and I have gotten to know each other a lot more here just in the last couple of years. I think, Jeff, you even said to me, it's because Jeff came in kind of the first thing that sort of led his resume was, he went to GIT, he went to the music school, which, it's a good thing, because it's like, okay, he's a skilled and educated musician. He can probably walk in and nail whatever we have to put in front of him. And he did. But the other part of it was that Jeff and I talked about is how much we basically shared the same record collection, with Angel and Frank Marino and Stars and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's funny, for the whatever we were in Megadeth together, we never talked about any of that stuff, right? It was like, that was not even in our conversation, Yeah.
There was no time because, again, it was 2 weeks in the studio tracking, which you can imagine that was fast and furious. And I played on every song. I did solos on every song but Into the Lungs of Hell, which I do live now with Kings, and I did rhythms. But we're right out on the road, so there's interviews and record store appearances and traveling and sleeping. So we're actually getting to know each other for the first time over this past going on 3 years now since we connected through the Nick Menza documentary.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst?
But just going back to that album, it also included Steve Jones, didn't it? Because you had Anarchy in the UK on there, which is the title of your tour for the upcoming UK Anarchy in the UK. Whose idea was that to cover that song?
I forgot, Jeff, and maybe you remember too, Paul Lanny, the producer of the record, he knew Steve. And Steve had recently, there's this whole movement of rockers who were getting sober, because if it didn't kill us, we got clean eventually. You know what I mean? So Steve and the Sex Pistols, being notorious, their bass player, Sid Vicious, obviously died from drugs. So there was a lot of people doing these sort of public service messages on MTV about getting clean. Steve was one of them, actually. And so, and Jeff had just come into the fold. So, he was, he kept his nose clean, a couple of the rest of us, not so much. And so it was interesting that we were living that lifestyle, right, going down those roads. And, we bring Steve in, and Steve's clean, and he rides in on his Triumph motorcycle with his Les Paul strapped to, in a case strapped to the back. And he had a broken arm. I forgot which one it was. I think it was this one because he could was right, yeah, because he could kind of strum. And so he comes in and he's got his typical kind of English Pistols attitude, right? Everything's.
What I found, David?
What's that?
We had him do the middle solo, his trademark solo.
Right.
I'm going to put it on my YouTube. I did a solo there, like another improv that's totally different. And I found just that section. Mm-hmm. So I'll put that up on my YouTube here once we get a little time before Australia. But he wrote in, and I remember at the end after he did that with his broken arm, he filled that middle solo. And I don't know who asked him about payment.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He said, oh, that's all right. Just get me he was basically said a bottle of something and some suction. I don't know if he was talking about, vacuuming his house.
He was funny. Yeah, and he is. I mean, you see his podcast, you see his interviews. He's very dry. He's very funny. In fact, as we were putting this together, that Netflix special came out, which I never did see, but Jeff was always encouraging me to go.
You need to watch it, Pistol.
Yeah.
It's basically his perspective. It was I think it's on Hulu, not Netflix.
Okay.
And it was free, and I watched the whole series. It was so well done. I couldn't believe how well done that was. So anyone who hasn't caught that, the Steve Jones Pistols thing.
Well, it's interesting too because we ended up covering Anarchy in the UK probably because it was the most popular song, worldwide from the Sex Pistols. But it's funny then. We had talked about covering Problems, and I don't know if we got talked out of it.
Recorded.
Did we record it? Yeah.
Yeah, when they pulled up the 2-inch, that was literally, I was too new I didn't want to voice any opinions. That was the only thing where I was trying to nudge Mustaine. Dude, we should put Problems on the album instead of Anarchy. I was really gunning for that because both tracks needed solos. And he was like, nah. So I ended up putting the solo on Anarchy, and then they got Steve Jones. And
were you fans
I think the version you put on the box set was the leftover from So Far. Did you? Unless you re-recorded it.
No, we re-recorded it on the Euthanasia record. We actually re-recorded it. That's why it's half step down in E flat. But it's funny about that. Yeah, so you actually recorded all the solos. Steve came in and then did the guest appearance. Yeah, I mean, look, we were big Sex Pistols fans. I mean, in fact, here's the funny thing. about this is that so we're on Capitol and the Pistols were on EMI. EMI owned Capitol. You know, we could have gone to them and said, "Hey, give us the lyrics," but we didn't. We sat like kids, like fans, writing out the lyrics as we remembered them, right? Like other like tendencies. It's supposed to be other council tendencies. So we had all these words wrong, and we were all excited, going, "This is so fucking cool!" Because we'd already done "These Boots Are Made for Walking," and that was more of a deliberate kind of changing of the lyrics. But this was more just
possibly. Instead of destroy the passerby.
The passerby. Possibly. So we thought these were the lyrics. I mean, we weren't trying to make this a farce or make a joke out of it. We thought these were the lyrics. And then I remember when it came out, Johnny Rotten made some comment like, it's fucking rubbish. And, you know, he was all like, we were like, you know, so when your hero shoots it down, like, the fuck, man? We thought we were like totally killing it for you guys, you know, and then he was all pissed off about it. So anyway, that was kind of a rookie move on our part, but it is what it is. That's how we heard it. Those are the lyrics that we thought were on there.
There was no internet to go search all lyrics.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I get it. So you were actually you appeared over in the UK around that time. You were playing with Flotsam and Jetsam, weren't you? You played at the Hammersmith.
They were on that Christmas on Earth with us. Cro-Mags.
So there's two appearances. So one, we were on tour here on the Peace Cells album earlier in '87. Ironically, we were over here with Alice Cooper doing an arena tour, and EMI really wanted us to get over there to the UK and see. And so I think we did the Hammersmith, which was a live broadcast in the BBC across the whole continent. Then we did to Amsterdam, Hamburg, maybe Frankfurt, I can't remember, and Paris. I think there was like 4 or 5 shows, something like that. It was just a short tour. And, you know, it's funny, when we played at the Hammersmith, we showed up and our gear didn't get through customs. And this is a live broadcast across the entire, across the entire UK. Now, it was all rented amplifiers and drums. That wasn't a problem. But we didn't have any guitars. So we're sitting there and there's like a Fender Jazz bass, a Fender Telecaster, which is like the country western guitar of the day, and like a silver, a sparkly or like a Sunburst Les Paul. We're like, we are not going on stage with those guitars, you know? And literally, I mean, it was like a half hour before the show started, the guitar showed up. And so we were able to go on stage and play and do our thing. But,
what was it like though, getting the British audience for the first time? Did you know how big you? I mean, you were getting a lot of coverage in Kerrang and Raw magazine. Metal Hammer wasn't there then.
No,
it came along a bit later. But you were getting a lot of coverage.
Yeah, no, we were getting a lot of coverage. You know, again, I think for us, you know, me, Jeff, Dave, all of us, you know, to the Hammersmith audience, legendary, obviously, No Sleep Till Hammersmith with Motorhead, Thin Lizzy. I mean, just these iconic performances, you know, at that venue. And then so to go perform there is our very first time there. And then we would perform, Jeff played there as well, you know, on So Far So Good So What. But, you know, the funny thing is the night before, so what we got in, I think, a day or two earlier, and we went right over, EMI took us right over to see Deep Purple on the Perfect Stranger tour. They were doing a big tour there at Wembley. And it was the first time we drank the British beer, which just knocks your frickin' face in the dirt, you know. So we're jet lagged, getting completely hammered with this really strong beer. And I just remember like going to take a leak or something, and I'm in the bathroom, and I hear smoke on the water starts. You go, oh man, I better run and turn on some smoke on the water. And I go, fucking Richie Blackmore's not even on stage. Like, what the hell did he do? You know, this is kind of he'd have these whimsical things where he would just leave the stage and leave the building, and somebody's like, oh, he already got in the car and he left. I'm like, what the fuck? This is his song. Like, why wouldn't he be on stage for this? So, you know, I just remember it was these classic moments, you know, between the beer, Richie Blackmore, Wembley, you know, then a whole day of press probably the next day at EMI, and then, you know, then the show that night. I mean, it was, you know, like Jeff said, it was to show up, meet and greets, performances, press. I mean, it was just this ferocious schedule that we had, you know, through that whole thing. So
my first
memory of the UK.
Oh yeah, go on.
is the first night that we got there, the label, there's always an A&R person, a handler in every
Yeah,
region.
yeah.
He took us out. It's the first time I ever had Indian food. You remember that day they took us out for Indian food?
I don't remember that.
And it was, the
That's probably
photograph.
jet lagged. He's probably drinking that British ale. That's why I don't remember it.
I've been addicted ever since. And I didn't understand that. And then I learned later that it's a really popular dish, a style of food in England, and it caught on eventually in America. But that was the first time I ever had amazing Indian food, was in the UK, the very night we arrived. Yeah.
So, you came back to do Donington's Monsters of Rock Festival. I mean, obviously this became newsworthy due to the fans that lost their lives. It was the biggest festival of its kind. Over 100,000 people there. The bands on the lineup. I mean, you couldn't get tickets for love or money. The tickets sold out in a blink of an eye. What do you remember about that day?
Well, the lineup, first of all, was because it was initially advertised some different bands, but when it fell out, it was Halloween, Guns N' Roses, opening for Megadeth, David Lee Roth, and they still had Steve Vai, but it was the Bissonette Brothers, and Kiss, and Iron Maiden, and that was their Seventh Son of the Seventh Son era tour. And the first thing I remember is because we played, 30,000 seat arenas and even festivals across Europe that were up into the 60,000s, but nothing prepares you when you're approaching the bus. And I remember we took the bus over with Guns N' Roses, and Slash was on the bus, really with the bottle of Jack at 10 a.m. And I was like, oh, shit, man. These guys are getting ripped this early. But as we pulled up, it was literally like looking at the ocean, but instead of water, it was people from every direction. I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, I imagine Woodstock was like that. I was too young for that, but any which way you look, and you can see some examples in the Guns N' Roses right about halfway through the Paradise City video. It shows them because they were on tour in America. They had to get on the Concorde, and all the black and white footage and the pogoing. And you actually see myself, Chuck Bueller, and our agent Andy Summers over on the side of the stage watching Guns N' Roses with our arms crossed. And it was stormy, and it was a gloomy day right up until we were backstage, and someone brought us the gloomy news that was it 6 people?
I think it was 2.
I think two people got killed. Yeah.
It was during Guns N' Roses set. So, imagine it's already gloomy. They give you this news and you got to go perform, right? But the strangest thing, just as we took the stage, like the sun came out and you could almost see the rays of sun breaking through the clouds. So for our set, it was like the whole energy shifted. That was my last gig with the band as well.
Yeah.
And a funny aside I'll remember, since you mentioned Pete Townsend before we started, we were talking about The Who before we went live, is don't ever try to do a Pete Townsend knee slide. During Anarchy, your last song, when the stage has rubber padding.
Yeah, that's right. Maiden had this Marley stage that they'd put down, so it was white, right? They covered the monitors and everything. They had it made it look like it was, the white snow of the Seventh Son. Yeah. We did shows. We did 7 shows with them in America on that tour. Yep. So it's kind of funny. We started at Christmas on Earth in Leeds, where we actually filmed the Anarchy in the UK video. So the live footage from that was at Leeds at that festival, and then there's some animation in there as well. we came back. We did another little run of shows up the West Coast. In fact, the photos on the So Far So Good So What album on the back were taken up at the Tacoma Dome in Washington. That was, I think, the last show we had played. That was our warm up, because then as we turned the calendar right into January 1988, we started in the middle of the month with Ronnie James Dio. It was Dio, Megadeth, Sabotage. And Jeff remembers that we actually had the Peace Sells backdrop when we started the tour, because people hadn't seen the album cover yet, right? So we didn't want to give the album cover away.
What the public doesn't realize, and especially back then when there was, real push behind the artist, the album is done 4 to 5 months before it's released, and they want that much time to kind of roll up and get the buzz going. So we were touring with the Peace Sells backdrop for a lot of that Dio tour, which I eventually got the gold album for Peace Sells, because our touring helped that go gold. During that window of time.
Yeah.
So that's it. You then part ways. So did you remain in contact? Did you remain friends over the years before you reconnected during the making of the Nick Menza documentary?
The funny thing that I just mentioned, when I went to Doc McGee to get the gold albums, because I got them both the same day, I was walking out to my car and you were walking in and you said, "What do you got there?" And kind of smiled at me, and I said, "Everything we worked for." Right?
Nice.
And then we'd bump into each other at NAMM. Just like by accident, we'd be walking down a hallway, like almost every year. Remember that? We'd bump into each other at NAMM and we'd take a picture. And then flash forward to a few years before we reconnected, there was the Ronnie Montrose Remembered. There was a whole kind of series of shows happening in Anaheim at the NAMM show. There was Randy Rhoads Remembered. There was the Bonzo Bash. And then the next one added was Ronnie Montrose. And there's actually, we didn't play it up, and a lot of people didn't notice, but that was the first time David and I were on stage together since Downington and it's on my YouTube. We did Bad Motor Scooter, and it was a who's who of guitar players: Gilby Clarke, Brad Gillis, Doug Aldridge, David, myself, Jimmy DeGrasso on drums, Keith St. John singing. Did I miss anybody?
Yeah, I think that was.
That's on my YouTube, but people want to check that. So, and Dave and I barely got a chance. It was so rapid fire. I think we said, "Hey," because these things.
Hey Jeff, what's happening? How are you over there on stage right?
There's 50 musicians on and off the stage at these tribute shows, and interviews and a lot of commotion. So at that time, we didn't really get to catch up, but we did an unrehearsed Montrose song, which was coincidental because David was in Montrose for a spell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so that was when I was a huge Montrose was one of the first guitar heroes back in the 70s when I started playing. So then flash forward to the filming of the Nick Menza documentary. I was contacted by Nick's liaison if I would participate, because a lot of people don't know that on the road, Nick was Chuck Bueller's drum tech on the So Far So Good So What tour. And because I was trying to stay a little clear of the drugs and the vibes. And honestly, I would have roomed with David because he was always really together, and he and Nick were always the ones at sound check running the songs, the three of us really. But Dave and David were kind of pals, so they wanted to room a lot. So I literally was rooming with Nick Menza. I was giving up like the rock star rooms, and I was rooming with the drum tech, for sobriety and just to be, and even like the cigarettes, Chuck would come in, and if I was rooming with Chuck, put the cigarette out at 3 a.m. in between the beds, and I hate cigarettes. So it's that kind of thing. So because I had such close, intimate ties with Nick, plus he'd been on my radio show, Music Without Boundaries, and we'd stayed in contact. Also, he came to MI. He was buddies with the vocal coach who taught the metal class at Musicians Institute. And they one day for Metal Performance Workshop, all the kids got to play In My Darkest Hour and with Nick and me. And so,
Wow.
it's these times we all ran into each other over the years, and it was never any bad blood. I always say all the ex-members, we kind of have a commiseration society. And I mean, I even have talked to Chris Broderick on the phone, and I've had Kiko on my show, because of living in Brazil. We have a great connection because I can speak Portuguese with Kiko a little bit. So, then I got invited for the Nick documentary, and the rest is history. We went
Dave,
out.
you said that there was a
in the booth, in the back booth where American Satan, where the band does the deal with Dow, in the very back booth. And we were paying the bill, and David stood up, and I literally whispered sweet nothings in his ear to the tune of a song that he and I were demoing for what became Rust in Peace. There were two songs after So Far, So Good, So What that we had a home studio, and in David's bedroom, I'd come over to Silver Lake, the house he was talking about, and I'd go in there, and Chuck would play the drum machine part, and we had two songs demoed, and to this day, a couple of those riffs stuck in my head, so I just sang it in his ear, and he was like, we got to get in a room and work on that. So that was really the catalyst for us working together, was 4 songs that we demoed. Now it's 2.5 years ago. we demoed, and now we've got like an album and a half of songs written, for whenever our original project comes out. And the Kings of Thrash thing kind of just came out of left field while we were writing. Every bi-weekly since the COVID, at the Whiskey a Go-Go, they have an event called the Ultimate Jam. It's
Chuck Wright's thing, isn't it?
Exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Chuck was one of the original catalysts and creators and facilitates, and he has help every week, and they do a different theme every other week. And I had played the Eddie Van Halen tribute around his birthday and the Randy Rhoads, and I played a few other, and to be honest, I remember it was the Ukraine themed show that they did, Ultimate Jam, and I went with Michael Nays where we ended up filming the Nick documentary, and a band got up and did a System of a Down tune, and a mosh pit broke out. And I'd never seen a mosh pit. I don't think I'd ever seen a mosh pit at the Whiskey, let alone at the Ultimate Jam. Funny enough, the next theme 2 weeks later was the Big Four. So I think that Chuck and the folks liked the mosh pit. So they invited me to get up and do some Megadeth, and I told him, well, I'm writing with David. He's in Arizona, but let me check. Maybe he'll fly in. And that's how the whole Kings of Thrash was born. Jessica Chase, who manages Bullet Boys, which Fred plays with, she helps facilitate the artists with Chuck. She matched us with Chaz. It was kind of a blind date. We never rehearsed. We rehearsed upstairs while the band downstairs was playing, and we couldn't barely hear. We did In My Darkest Hour, Mary Jane, Peace Cells, and one other. What else? Wake Up Dead?
I think it was just the 3. I think, yeah.
And so we went down blind, and we had no idea that Chaz was going to be as good as he was. It got picked up by, the music press, and then David's manager got ear and an eyeful of it, and he said, well, you guys got to take this out on the road, and you got to do Killing Is My Business, and you got to do So Far, So Good, So What in their entirety. And I was going, wait, I was never planning to do any Megadeth the rest of my life. I got to go back. We had to go brush up. So it's really for the fans, and because the buzz that initial thing created. And we actually had Mike Heller from Fear Factory, and he's with David in the Lucid. He played drums that evening, and he was the guy helping us engineer our demos of our original stuff. But I caught wind a couple days later, Fred Aching had played some Slayer that evening. We didn't even get to see him because of all the commotion, But in the aftermath videos, I said, "There's our drummer right there," and the rest is history.
So the objective then, Dave, to recapture the spirit of the time and the genre. This is what this Kings of Thrash project, this is what it is all about. How easy or difficult is it going to be to get that?
You know, look, it happens so organically. I mean, exactly as Jeff said, that is exactly the timeline of how it sort of mechanically came together. I had sort of had the intuition on it. I was back at the Chiller Theater in New Jersey. It's a big autograph show back there. Jeff and I we appear at some of these, you know, mostly the horror conventions, right? Because the horror genre plays well with heavy metal, right? So I'm there at this first time I'd been there, and it was right at the beginning, right as I was out of Megadeth back in 2021, and the band had just come through on tour. Fans were giving me their reviews of the show, and obviously very disappointed I was not there, as they would then lay down mostly "Killing Is My Business" records for me to sign. You know, lots of times just "Rest in Peace" and "Peace Sells." These are the fan favorites. But suddenly, you know, and I've noticed this over the years, "So Far So Good, So What" and "Killing Is My Business" were these kind of, you know, cult classic records. And, you know, I have friends, Mark Tremonti from Creed and Alter Bridge being one, who is of an age that record really spoke into that world. And that's kind of the, let's call it the 90s modern rock, you know, musicians, you know, many who got very famous, of course, you know, of that era. And that was kind of Master of Puppets for Metallica, So Far So Good, So What for Megadeth. You know, these were maybe Among the Living from Anthrax. These are the records that really, you know, inspired them, you know. And so, you know, I think as Jeff and I were reconnecting, it was so cool because the record that we played on, you know, which doesn't often get recognized as, you know, kind of, you know, again, the "Rust in Peace, Peace Sells," this big thing. But it's as a fan, as a Megadeth fan, it's really one of the key records, you know, and it was the last record of the 80s. And that was a real transitional time when music was transitioning. So, you know, I think as we said, you know, to do "Killing" and "So Far So Good, So What" in their entirety, you know, look, these are short records. I mean, back in the day, we'd put 8-9 songs of these records, and we'd be stretching it to come in at 32 minutes long, right? Because I think that's what the publishing deals were. I think that's why we only did that. I think the music publishing deals only required like 8 or 9 tracks. That's why we put on there. In the 90s, the music publishing deals changed so that we had to put 11 songs on there in order to get paid, you know, the full share of a music publishing advance. So that's why that changed. But, you know, these were short records back in those days. And, you know, so, you know, but I tell you, it was a muscular workout, man. I mean, it was a heavy workload to learn this much material. And as we're heading into a show this weekend in Long Beach with Chris Poland's joining us, we're heading to Australia here in a month to go down there and play the "Peace Sells" album. You know, these records are, you know, I think for Jeff and I, we've stayed in good shape. So for us, it's probably not such a big deal. But, you know, if you haven't been playing this stuff over the years, to go back and to dig into it, it would be a lot of work. I mean, you know, for me, I've kind of just naturally stayed up on this stuff, and you know, when you're in the room recording it, writing it, you're a part of the fabric of it. As Jeff certainly is with "So Far So Good, So What" as well. It's, you know, it comes back to you more organically and easier. You know, it is a little more the riding the bike thing. It does kind of come back a lot easier for you.
Are you going to be playing "Jump in the Fire"? I mean, this track again's got history. Obviously, Dave was in Metallica and had written it, but it was also didn't used to be in your rehearsal sets. It did, and
we did play it on our tour, our U.S. tour back last year in 2023. I guess that was. We actually put it in, and it was kind of at my request because it was, first of all, I just liked the song, and you know, I can Look, I can kind of pick up a guitar. It's just a pentatonic riff, right? It's kind of a fun, easy riff, and I just like it. That was a cool song, and it is. It's a Dave song from the No Life to Leather era. And the reason we put it in was just to kind of have things that were part of the early thrash movement, and then we went so far back as doing things from Riot, Def Leppard, things that inspired the thrash movement. You know, kind of the new wave of British heavy metal, that era. And we keep a few of those kind of hanging around the fringes that we'll throw in the set from time to time. On the Anarchy in the UK tour that's coming up, you know, we realized that, you know, November, and this has been on my radar for a while, but, you know, November 1st is the 30th anniversary of the Euthanasia record.
Euthanasia.
And as best I know, that's the only Megadeth record that actually has gone gold in the UK. The rest of them, I've got some, I actually see my silver, So Far So Good, So What's hanging on my wall right here.
I need that shit.
In fact, you know, let's go get them. Hang on a second. Hang on. We're going to go get our records. There it is, right here. There's the silver for So Far So Good, So What. So it is silver, right? Is that what they called it? I think that's what they called it. So, you know, you go silver, then you go gold. You know, in America, it's just gold and platinum. But there it is. You know, that's it. So the Euthanasia record actually went. I've got my platinum one from the U.S. up
you
here.
Went double, but that went double platinum in the U.S. Didn't it?
It did, yeah. So, you know, I thought, look, to celebrate, let's go celebrate a couple. You know, we're not doing the album in its entirety, you know, but we want to, you know, nudge at it a little bit. In fact, we've added Train of Consequences in the set, and it's one of the fan favorites. In fact, this last week we were just seeing reviews going, "Oh my God, they played Train of Consequences," you know. So, you know, we went from being a band that sort of covered the '80s and even 70s stuff. If you went back to Riot and Def Leppard and some of that stuff, I mean, I guess that was right at the cusp of 1980 or so. But we, you know, then we started to go into some of the 90s stuff, you know, pick up a little. We got a little, you know, kind of a little Rust in Peace medley that we do. We've got now a couple things from from Euthanasia. So
does it get overlooked, Euthanasia, as an album, because it was hugely successful,
right?
You know, following it was a number 4 album in the US, and following on from that, people always said that, look, this was the last real Megadeth album until Dystopia in 2016. It was certainly the highest charting. Nothing ever got close after that. So the people tend to sort of gloss over it and say, "Oh, yeah, you know."
Here's what I remember about it. It was probably our most famous, the highest selling record outside of America. Meaning, as things were transitioning in America with the Seattle movement coming in, you know, we submitted Trains of Consequences. It was very well received. We performed on MTV at what used to be the Ritz, Webster's Hall. We did it was called Night of the Living Megadeth. It was something. I think it came out on Halloween, so like the night before the release of the record. So the setup of it was huge. But the Atulamon single that we submitted, just they wouldn't accept it, and it just, that was it, and it was over. And then the album campaign was over as far as MTV, and we were not, and that was kind of it for Megadeth on MTV. That was it; it was done. And you know, they were getting into the real world and reality TV, and of course, you know, now Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots, you know, the whole, you know, the Seattle movements, you know, Pearl Jam, and that was now the next thing that was getting all of the love. But we had built a very big worldwide fan base, and I guess probably the thing, you know, Jeff got to see this too. One of the things with the band, and this, I think this speaks to metal, is, you know, metal is big everywhere. So it's not like you go to New York and you're hugely popular and you go to Kansas and they've never heard of you, right? It's like when you go to London, you're as popular as you are in LA as you are in Tokyo. It's level across the board, and that just speaks to our tribe. And, you know, we get to enjoy the same success now as we're out doing this stuff with Kings of Thrash. And that's why, you know, to go to the UK and do a proper UK tour is really a treat, you know, to not just play London and Birmingham and go home, but to go and play Belfast and Dublin and really do a proper tour.
Woohoo!
Yeah, and then we've then there's offers and the phone's ringing for more stuff. So we'll everybody will be alerted to that. But it's really starting to, and I think what we offer is obviously Jeff and I are from the day,
Oh, geez.
OGs, and I think we're playing a part of the legacy that people they've been longing for it, and they enjoy hearing it. I'd like to think we do a really good job. We do a respectful job of it, and it's really just for like Jeff said earlier, it's for the fans to enjoy.
We like the deep cuts and the songs we know the fans really want to hear, and especially with Killing, because they only had a limited budget. Some of those songs fans are realizing, man, because we're playing them a little funkier, and there's definitely a funk vibe in that record. Because Dave's sister listened to a lot of funk and Motown, and you listen to the verses in Skull Beneath the Skin and Love to Death, they're total funk. That's funk sped up, hyper chaotic, but it's still a funk riff. So by just slowing it down and playing it cleaner, and sober, people are understanding the riffs and really reconnecting with these records, which it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win for the fans, for Dave, and for us.
Just going back to that Euthanasia album, the reviews, I mean, obviously there's been reviews written for everything, but the best one that I read about that was metal machine music calibrated to kill.
Okay. Which is so funny because that record was, it was a metal record for sure, but I thought it was venturing more into hard rockville, right? Because, first of all, Max Norman, your fellow Englishman there, who
Blizzard of Oz.
Yeah, right. Those records he had mixed, Rust in Peace. He produced Countdown to Extinction, which was a very painstaking, laborious album, to just have everything be perfect. And when we walked in to start writing and putting together, actually even building the studio here in Phoenix for Euthanasia, he goes, right, man, we're not fucking doing that this time. You guys need to fucking learn your parts and play your parts. You need to learn to fucking play like a band. And like, he was just over it. He goes, I'm tired of these sort of fucking technology records. I want to make an organic rock band record. You guys are good players. You're a good band. You write good songs. Learn how to fucking play as a band in the studio, which I love because, the Blizzard of Oz records are like that.
Yeah.
That's how we recorded Killing Is My Business. It's kind of mostly how we recorded Peace Sells. The records that were really connecting with people, they have, there's an organic glue to it. And, as we've recorded some stuff together now with us, and Jeff and I have recorded some things together, Jeff is he's really a stickler on this shit, which is get in the room, feel the fucking amp, blow some air against your pant leg, let it bleed into the microphones, in fact, there's techno, we're just talking about this.
And put it to 2-inch tape, man, analog style, woo!
Yeah, and sometimes tape is possible, other times it's not. But there's this thing that I think Jeff has been big on too, recording, which is having the bleed into the room, into the mics, into the drum mics. I think when we recorded So Far So Good So What, Paul Lanny was Mutt Lange was making the big hit records, with Hysteria. And of course, we all loved Def Leppard. We all loved that record. It was like a study in science about how amazingly great this record was. But one of the things that started to happen is things were getting, in the 80s, things were getting so clean, so pristine, so sort of high octane that we started to lose that vibe that we all liked, probably us growing up as kids in the 70s. You hear these Van Halen records from Sunset Sound, and you hear you hear David Lee Roth's vocal mic is open, and you can hear the bass bleeding through, and you hear the drums bleeding through into the vocal mic, and that's the sound of that. There's something we were just watching last week on the bus. something came across, and it was, I think it was one of those AC/DC, How Do They Made Back in Black and Highway to Hell, where they were using some techniques to to get this bleed that would sort of sew and glue the tracks together, because you would hear the bleed of the other albums. And Jeff and I geek out. We send this shit back and forth to each other because we love, how in today's world with the technology we have, because things have moved far forward from where they were, how do we try to incorporate what we grew up with, recreate what we grew up with, yet be as good as what it can be today as well, And I think for any of us that are in the recording arts and sciences business as we are, that's always the trick now, is to make it as good as it can be, but yet have the human spirit and the human flavor about it, so that it actually connects with human beings when they listen to it.
You two have been working together now, last couple of years. You've had writing sessions, you've written a lot. There's a lot of music there. When is it likely that any of this new material will see the light of day? When can we see something released?
It'll be like the Steely Dan of heavy metal here. We'll have this record that's brewing in the background. Well, the truth of it is, look, we started writing some stuff together on tour last year. We had a track called Bridges Burned, which was that riff that Jeff was singing to me at the Rainbow as we were paying the bill. That was that riff from 1988. And we whipped that into a song. It's essentially done. We went in the studio, and one of the things that happens when you go in the studio is not only does it show your strengths, it for sure shows your weaknesses and things that you need to improve upon, So it was fun to take our band in the studio and kind of go through that process, because at least we know what we have as a live act. We know what we have as a recording act. And Jeff and I had, again, like he said, we were already writing stuff before Kings of Thrash even formed. So I think we kind of started to realize we've got two buckets here. We've got Kings of Thrash, and then we've got this other lane over here where we can write stuff together. And that lane probably has many lanes within it as well that we could write with. So we've written with several different singers. We've written with some other musicians around the world. Just, getting a feel for each other as writers, getting a feel for what kind of timbre and tone a different vocalist brings to it. I've sat out here and written stuff on piano and sent it over to a friend of ours in France. We've written with people around the world, and so, once you get busy on the road touring like we are now, obviously I think a lot of our energies are kind of focused on that right now. But in the background, there's always, we're always revisiting these tracks. And sometimes you write and you need to walk away from it. And then you go back to it and you go, okay, do we have anything here? Or was this just utter rubbish? What do we have? So, I think for us at this age, we've, things don't operate on these sort of timelines like they did back in the 80s and the 90s, where you got to just grind, write, put out a record, tour, grind, write, put out. We're not on those schedules now. So we can, in fact, you don't even have to put records out. You can put singles out. You can throw stuff up on digital aggregators and Spotify and things. So, the pressure to have to sort of make a collection of songs to say this is who we are, people already know who we are, so we kind of have the luxury of I think probably putting out some material at, even a track at a time if we want.
But the ultimate for you is you are, as you have said, a road warrior. You can't stay home because you get bored. You're no good at golf. You can't surf. All it is.
All correct. Checks all the boxes. D, all the above.
Because we keep getting these Thrash tour dates. And
I mean, it's
so, as long as people are offering us dates, we're going to go out and do this and just let the songs percolate.
Yeah.
At this point, in the way albums and the album market, the only reason to make a record is if it's going to be like a life's work. Like I got a solo album I'm working on, I'm going to be putting out this year. I've been recording this album for over 12 years. It's a process. And if you want great songs, Segovia always used to say, it takes a lifetime. And he was talking about like mastering a piece by Bach or something, which Bach probably wrote when he was a kid in 5 minutes. But, it can take a long time to really let a song mature. Some songs finish themselves in a night. And I've had this experience on my album where I wrote one song, literally the whole song came in one night. Then other songs literally took 12 years. You go through 2, 3 different singers. It had 2, 3 different titles, you know, and then you finally, because the key about songwriting is keep your ego out of it and don't try to form it and make it and turn it into something conditional. You got to allow. You got to allow and let the song be, and let the song pull you and tell you what to do and how the song is already perfect. It exists out here somewhere. And I think songwriters, our process and rehearsing and everything we do to try to live healthy and be an open vessel. So you have like open bucket right here where the song just drops in, and then it's your job not to muck it up before it gets out by putting too much production, too many instruments, the wrong singer. So David and my thing, it's almost spiritual. We're allowing for the music to just manifest itself through us, and we don't have a timeline, we don't have a expectation. And that's, I think, what's going to allow it to be the best that it can be, whatever it is.
And Dave, the big thing for you is when you do get back over to the UK, you will have time enough to go and see the ABBA Avatar show.
Man, I am going to see that thing. I mean, look, now ABBA's cool again, right? Every you say ABBA, people are like, oh, yeah, listen. But there was a time, dude, when you said ABBA, people were like, oh, eject, get this guy out of here. But, you know, growing up in Minnesota and being of Scandinavian descent, you know, ABBA, you know, they were... You know, there was like 2 songs I remember in the grocery store: "Dancing Queen" and "Afternoon Delight." Right, good shopping with my mom as a kid, right, or something. But and maybe "Pina Colada." I don't know, whatever. But basically, what's now called yacht rock, right? But yeah, I mean, ABBA just pound for pound just has these amazing songs and hits, and they've got a great story about how the 4 of them came together, and you know, it's kind of working musicians, you know, and in fact, one of them, they had that hotel up in Stockholm. I remember staying at that. I think on the Dystopia,
you stayed there
at the Dystopia tour. Yeah, we stayed there. Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. So I want to go see it because, and I love what they said. They said, "Hey, we're old. People don't want to see old ABBA. They want to see us as we were when we were young and vibrant in their 20s." And so I think the Avatar thing is just so hip and cool, and to build that whole arena just for them. So. Thank you for the reminder. I will put that in the book as soon as we get off.
Thrash, we're down. That's moving out.
Kings of Thrash, throwing down at ABBA.
Last thing, then, you've been in the business for 4+ decades, 5 decades. Right. Is there anything left that you want to achieve that you haven't achieved yet?
Well, my manager is insisting that I put out this piano upright bass album. So Jeff's talking about an album that took 12 years to make. I think that will be mine. It'll take 12. I don't like the upright bass. It's not my instrument. I don't like the sound of it. The only sound I like of it is on Jailhouse Rock. I think it's got the most rad. The Elvis version of, Jailhouse Rock. Yeah. He does that walking line that's so awesome. It's very Gene Simmons, you know what I mean? So I've been an electric bass player. That's the instrument I like. But, it's funny. I probably at some point will do a solo, like a real true solo record and it'll probably be more piano songs and stuff like that. I've got a whole ton of stuff. In fact, we were even writing some. I was sending some over to Jeff back in January. And they may not be right for us, and I think that's one of the things when you're writing with people is you find certain collaborators that work well with you on certain things. And, the piano is it's a special space and emotion, and I write lyrics that are very personal to me. And I think probably before I croak here at some point, I should probably record that record. But I want a collaborator. I like collaborating with people. It's one thing to have something that's very personal for me to then say, hey, come over here and listen to this song and play, because that's a very revealing moment, where where you're just having to kind of reveal this emotion, and you know, you're being judged, right? Do you like it or not? Right? And so that's something that I think at some point I probably will do, which is kind of funny because I started originally on, not wasn't really piano. We had a Wurlitzer organ at the house. My mom played piano, but then she bought a Wurlitzer organ because she sang in the church choir and stuff. So I learned, that was my very first instrument, was learning to how to read, write, and play music, a proper manuscript on a keyboard instrument. So maybe it would be appropriate for me to end the cycle on a keyboard piano type of instrument at some point.
So you two, you guys are obviously having a good time. There's no pressure. You can do what you want when you want. Yet there's always going to be that question that everybody is going to ask you, and for most people, it come right at the front of an interview. But this would probably be the last question. It'd be: would you or could you ever envisage a time where you and the other Dave got back together and worked together on Megadeth?
Well, I suggested that in 2004 when he was coming back from his hand injury, talking about putting it back together again. I said, why don't we do, because Asia and Yes had just done it. I thought it was so cool. They brought everybody back, Steve Howe and Trevor Rabin, right? And I'm a Trevor Rabin fan. I'm kind of more of a fan of that era. But there's some that are the fan of the other guy, right? So, I thought, what a cool thing to bring Marty and Nick. Nick was still with us at that point. Gar was the only, deceased member of the legacy, and I just thought, man, how cool would it be to bring everybody back, and even if it was a tour, to just do something like that. Because as the years go on, it's harder and harder to do that, I guess now they save that shit for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, right? Then they get everybody there. So, look, the truth of it is we've all had a great journey. We've had our own personal journeys, our journeys together. Look, Dave's doing his thing. He seems happy where he's at doing that. Jeff and I are happy over here doing our thing. And, when you spend some years and some miles together in the Yellow Submarine, the tin can of a tour bus and hotels and planes, I mean, look, it's easy to get on each other's nerves. It's easy to, to just, you just need some space. And especially I think as we get older and we've done it a lot more. That's what I told the guys last week. We're on the bus. I was like, guys, I've been bouncing around in these tin cans for 40 plus years, so, it's fun because our singer Chaz, he hadn't been on hadn't really done the, well, we did a bus tour last year, but for people that haven't done it as much, it's thrilling, and it's still fun for me, man. Get on a bus, lay in your bunk, lay in your coffin, and go, all right, I guess if I die here, I'm just driving 70 miles an hour down the road tonight. That's the journey, that's where the journey ends. That's the life of a troubadour, the life of a musician. So, I think, for us to just be out doing what we love to do, and the fact that people still actually want to pay us to do it and still ask us to go to the stage, I mean, that is a real gift. It's a real treat, that they still want to hear that from us. So we're lucky that we all got to be in one of the cool bands that people still want to see and hear us do this.